I'm the oldest of seven children, and I was a nanny to nine mentally ill kids while pregnant. And I I have three kids of my own, many nephews, and it's kind of amazing to watch once you're in a state of contemplation a lot that you can then watch yourself becoming the eye of the storm. And then as you begin to maintain full acceptance of whatever's going on around you, maybe my husband having a nervous breakdown the other day. And it was just divinely perfect, exactly how it needed to happen, how how then we could learn from that and the opening that occurs from there. Or in a household with that many kids with mental illnesses, to watch this thunderous hurricane of a family ripping each other apart, and being able to say, am I able to maintain true peace here right now while these kids are trying to hurt each other, hurt me, hurt everyone? And watching then it unfold like grace, these beautiful aspects of light, just naturally penetrating even the most stubborn of consciousness. And now, of course, here we have the opportunity to do this in the privacy of our homes while the hurricane of earth is shifting, changing, revealing all of the tension.
Yeah.
And I want to speak to also many of the souls coming through right now, coming through to show us what that sensitivity looks like, the gift of sensitivity in the sacrifice, the sensitivity to all of the dimensions, the sensitivity to all of the ways our senses are actually all truly crossed. You mention it in the 19th Gene Key, synesthesia, which really touched me. And my husband randomly picked a page, very randomly. He had not heard of you before, and I said, "Oh, this is who I'm talking to." And I showed him your book, and he was like, "Oh my gosh!" He randomly picked the page. It was the 19th Gene Key. It just happened to be, you talk about the synesthetes, and I was surprised because that's one of the ways my brain's wired. I was also surprised to see the mention of the animal whispers, the ones who can speak with the animals and the plants and the bugs and the fungus and all of the above. These are talents that all humans have, and they're something that I'm watching come online more and more as Gaia shifts. It's shifting up like this warm bath coming up, slowly taking us over. And I'm reminding people, hey, look, it's hit the feminine power center of the root. Worthlessness of the feminine has been addressed big time for all of the ladies in the feminine bodies. And then the men, it's hit the heart now. And, that's why my husband had a breakdown the other day. He needed his heart to be fully open. And then it's going to hit our voice. It's coming to the voice now, speaking truth, speaking purity, speaking about the truth of death. And then it'll be hitting the rest of the senses. It's going to occur here. We're going to experience one mind. Could you help us prepare for that? What ideas would you give to us who, some of us are capable of the one mind already, and I'm so excited to see what will happen to my third eye as this occurs. But I had seen it sort of as a future vision of one mind, one heart, one body, which you talk about in depth. What can we do to prepare for these transformations that are happening to us from the network of Gaia, especially when it comes to the mind?
Well, before I go into the mind, I want to just anchor it, because for the most important preparation is to be embodied, is to be in our body, and is to be in a healthy body, and to eat healthily, and to have good rhythms in our life, you know, and to have good sleep and all those things where where you're not living off anxiety, you know. So those are fundamental requirements for higher spiritual integration. And there are many people that don't, you know, that go into those higher states without that kind of basis. And that can be dangerous, and you can fry your circuits, and you can increase your anxiety level, you know, to a really difficult pitch where it's hard to come back from, you know, the raising of the Kundalini too early, that kind of thing. So the most important thing, you know, was why I stress the teaching of the belly. You know, the belly is where everything is grounded. And so I say to everyone who I work with, who is like, just place your hands on your belly and get rooted to the earth. Take your shoes and socks off, be out in nature, connect and ground, and, you know, be present in earth and nature, in your body, you know, particularly put your hands on your belly and start to love your belly, because that's, you know, that's where the core of our being is. And many people are really uncomfortable with that area of the body. So in a way, you know, that I've always had this intuition strongly that actually if you only did that, it would be enough to take you all the way to the oneness. So in other words, if you only were to be grounding in your belly, like the indigenous people, for example, of the world, I'm generalizing, but like those people have traditionally been very rooted to the earth and in their bodies, and kind of aware and eat well, and, you know, and kind of live simply. And those are, and live in tune with the earth's rhythms, you know, rather than if you're up all night on your internet kind of till 2 a.m. and then you go to sleep. It's like those cycles are not, they're in the long, it's okay once in a while, but over time, those cycles kind of going to damage your system. And also, by the way, teenagers seem to have a lot more kind of capacity and almost need to kind of blow those circuits, you know, so don't come down too hard on them. But if you're older and you're kind of more mature, then, you know, those are things that are not so great. Like, so that's, I say that all that just kind of my safety talk, like to really prepare your body and to be in it. And yeah, I would not recommend anyone do any spiritual practice unless if they feel any anxiety, you know. So that's the first thing to deal with, you know, deal with the basic kind of tremors that the body sometimes has. And that's all done through, you know, physical things and, you know, health and deep, good breathing practice, you know, and yeah, maybe you need some help with the trauma in your body. And that's a journey. Like many of us are on that journey. And after a while of being on that journey, your body starts to relax and clear itself. And then you become ready for these higher practices. And then that kind of magical thinking realm can really open up naturally inside you. And it's almost like that intuition I mentioned in the beginning is a pathway. You know, in fact, the shamans, they talk about the, you know, the tree of life that goes from the underworld, the unconscious, up the middle world to the upper world of the superconscious. You know, so, and that's really what I'm talking about. Like, if the unconscious isn't kind of clear, you know, if you've got a lot of demons still unprocessed, if you have kind of secrets that you're holding on to, that you know, those will all come against you. You know, you need to be clear, clean, truthful, honest, open, and deal with yourself and gentle with yourself. And so that you have this channel running through your being that's clear, so that you can move between the realms, you know, and the energy won't get stuck somewhere where there's a shadow. So, and it doesn't mean you know, we don't have to like kind of be super clean, but we have to be willing always to kind of own our own stuff. And then, yeah, that channel of the intuition where the light passes gets broader and broader, you know, because there's more, you're using it more and more. And then that magical thinking opens up, and it's actually the closest way I can describe it is you start to remember. You start to remember your higher being. You start to remember your soul. You start to remember the field of light. You start to remember what you really are. You start to remember yourself outside of the form, because you're expanding. And it is a memory, a series of memories. You know what I mean by memory? Because memory, if you're sitting chatting to an old friend and they say, "Do you remember that time when we went down to the river and you did that?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, wasn't that great?" That feeling of, "Oh yeah," that feeling is beyond doubt. You know that happened. Your body knows it. You remember it. It's stored in your body as a memory. You could almost bring back the smells and the feelings, and and that memory is beyond kind of hope. It's beyond. It's beyond almost certainty. It's like it is truth, right? And so when we begin to ascend and open, that's what happens. The memories come back to us of what we are, and then they come back in layers, because it's a lot to integrate, right? Do you have to integrate stuff that's like mind-blowing? You're like, that it just, I don't know, like an insight I had recently that was just, I don't know, like I was just thinking about the Deva realm, the Devas, like the plant realms that have this subtle realm. And I was thinking, just contemplating how people, how these great works of art, like the Lord of the Rings, right, that describes this Deva realm, and the fantasy realms. And it came to me that those, when they have the Ring of Truth to them, those like that trilogy by Tolkien, there's just as much kind of reality in that as anything. Like that may actually be the biography of some epoch of another parallel dimension, because what I know is there's nothing new under the sun. Everything already exists. So when someone writes a book like that, it already exists. There's truth coming through. And so what we even consider fantasy is reality in another realm, because there's all these parallel dimensions that we have to kind of ascend through, and we have to integrate each one as we go. And it's a lot for the mind. So, but the universal spirit is very compassionate, and our contemplation allows us time to digest and explore it layer by layer as we kind of ascend. And also we have to resolve paradoxes. Like how can I be a human and have like one of the great paradoxes I've been working with as a mystic is the teachings that come from the East and the teachings that come from the West. The teachings that come from the East are all about the sort of primal nothingness, the unity consciousness. They really focus on the unity consciousness, like becoming one, surrendering yourself into the universal spirit, the non-dual spirit of simplicity, where the ego is nothing and is kind of seen as an illusion, and then we are just one with all that is, right? And everything else is an illusion. Everything, your individuality, all of it. It's like there's no more. And that's kind of a very big dominant spiritual lineage thing that has a big following in the world, and some really sort of mature teachers even alive today. And then the Western view, I call it is more Western. It's like more the initiatic view, which is more about, the quantum realms, and it's more based on individuality. And so one of the things I've kind of been playing with is this notion of what I call a post-ego individuality, the soul, and how can we be everything, and yet how can we also be a something within the everything, because each one of us is a something that is eternal within the everything. And that something has its uniqueness, and it's had all this story of all these incarnations and maybe all these universes it's lived in, and it's kept this thread, and that is not something that you can lose. But the Eastern way is like, no, anything is an illusion. But that you have to integrate those. So you have to have God and then you have to be a God within God. Do you know what I mean? So you're one of God's eyes, or one of God's, children, if you could put it like that, So integrating the soul and that kind of unity spirit is like takes a huge being, in a way, to be able to do that. And your mind has to kind of go through all these. It has to filter all the belief systems, even the ones that are spoken by people who are very enlightened. Many of them, especially now, I think they have to be challenged, and opened. Not that there's not truth in them, but they have to be expanded now to contain more. So I'm going on, but it's like I just have this feeling that there was a discomfort in me for years, that there was this sense that once you get awakened, that's the end. It's like there's nothing beyond unity. Well, I'm like, there's a part of me that always thought, well, what do you mean it's the end? I don't want it to end. I'm an adventurer. Are you kidding? I want to, I don't want to end. And so, and it wasn't that wasn't fear speaking. It was like my indomitable spirit of lover of life and consciousness. Like, I don't want, that feels like that to me. That would feel like a kind of, I don't know, like one of those, like a really great play that kind of ends in a bit of a sort of anticlimax. You're like, oh, well, where's the fun in that? I want to know what the link is to the next part, part 2 and part 3. I don't want it to end here. And so I feel like all those impulses that are inside us have to be listened to. And so I'm really exploring that edge in that we need a new spirituality. We need a new spiritual paradigm for the new human that's coming. And it's much more generous, and it is eternal. We are eternal beings, and that means there's no end to our adventuring. Otherwise we wouldn't be eternal, So, and at the other side, what the Eastern mystics are saying is also true. There kind of is an end, and it's all ended before it's even begun. So the paradox of those two actually can live inside you, but it's beyond the mind. It's truth that requires expanded consciousness.